So a very warm welcome to UCL Rare-Books Club, particularly because we've got a wonderfully wide audience here today. We've got people from across the UK. I've got York, Cambridge, Manchester, and the Science Museum and the Wellcome and Cambridge. But also because we have people from Australia and China as well. So we really appreciate you joining us in very different time zones. That's wonderful. My name is Tabitha Tuckett and I'm the Rare Books librarian and academic liaison librarian for the Bloomsbury campus at University College London. And we run this series every summer, and at the moment we're on a weekly cycle after being slightly less frequent in the pandemic years. We are in the middle of the series, and if you want to book on for next week, I'll put the information in the chat. We have a session handing over to our student book collectors across universities in London for the Anthony Davis Book Collecting Prize. We've got 2 finalists showing their work in person next week, one 18th century Neapolitan prints and rare books, and the other 20th and 21st century books, primarily Polish books, on art, health and illness. But today we have a session on tech tools for research with rare books, manuscripts and archives. And again, I've decided to hand over to 2 of our star students because many of us get into the habit of using the everyday technology tools and apps that we're used to, and it sometimes can be quite hard to find out about new apps. So we're going to hear from 2 students today. We've got Sam Brown and Ollie Nelmes. And we're going to start with Sam Brown. Now, Sam is, many of you may remember Sam from this series last year. She gave a most fantastic talk on early modern Arabic printing in the Rare Books Club series last year. She's a PhD student at UCL studying the Arabic language in England before 1635, but she also works on the online provenance directory, provenance database, Book Owners Online, with David Pearson. So we're really, really pleased to have Sam talk to us. I would say that the things we're going to learn about today, many of you might be already using them. Some of you will never have heard about them. But what we wanted to do is just give you some examples of how these tools can be used in rare book research. You may well have your own things to suggest at the end of the session. We'll have about 10 minutes time for questions before 2 o'clock, but the speakers today have very kindly agreed to stay till 2:30 for those of you who would like to stay for questions. But I'll make sure that we pause at 2 o'clock for you to leave. So without more from me, I'm going to hand over to you, Sam, and you're going to talk to us for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have Ollie following up. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Tabitha. I will just share my screen. You might see Zoom coming back at you first. Let me try and sort this out. Right. Can everyone hear me okay? Let me know in the chat if not. So as Tabitha said, I am a PhD student. I'm part-time, and I'm also a part-time RA on Book Owners Online. And I do other bits and pieces of like freelance and ad hoc work as well. So I spend a lot of time and brain power trying to make sure I'm across different elements of different projects and trying to manage my time appropriately. So I'm going to run through a number of pieces of software and little tools that I use, both in terms of time management and task management, and also a couple of things I use to manage this kind of evolving corpus, working corpus that I'm working on. I have lots of early modern books and manuscripts that I'm seeing and taking lots of pictures of. So first of all, I thought I would quickly run through with you a time time tracking, time management app called Toggl, which lots of people who, if you're already tracking time, chances are that you are using this because it's one of the most popular options around. This is the desktop app here. I'm obviously working on a Mac. Windows might look a little bit different, but I'm sure it's a similar thing. It's a really handy little app. You can see down here that there are time things that I've previously tracked. And if I want to add a new entry, I do it here. So I'll just say I'm doing the Rare-Books Club now. Previously I was planning it, but now I'm doing it. So I'll change that and start tracking. I press enter and it starts. This little section here that's highlighted green is where you can name your time entries. I spent quite a little bit of time trying to work out the best ways of naming this because it does pay off on the website, which I'll show you in a second. This PhD section is kind of, Toggl calls it the client, and this is a kind of umbrella over the project, a big project that you're working on. So I have one for PhD, one for BOO, which is Book Owners Online, PGTA. So that's all the projects that I really need to be aware of how much time I'm spending on them. And then engagement is a kind of subcategory of that client, the project that I'm contributing towards it. Engagement, I've also got things like admin and research. And then this box here is kind of free text to just help you track exactly what you've been doing. I'll show you now, hopefully. This is the website. It's a free app, so it's free to download and also free to use the website. And you can see here in this top left corner that it's still tracking my time, which is really handy. I sometimes use this if I'm working on a shared computer and don't have the app installed on it, so I can still keep track of what I'm doing. And another thing that's really good about the website is that it offers you all this kind of visualization, so you can see by client or by project what you've been spending the most time on any given week. So that is tracking time. Sorry, I'm going to kind of whiz through these, but if anyone's got any questions, do ask at the end. The next thing that I want to show you is something called OmniFocus, which is effectively just a way of managing your to-do list. I go through quite a lot of apps trying to work out what is the best one for me and the way my brain works, and this one I've been using for quite a few months now, and I do find that it's really good. I'm in this projects view here. A lot of what I'm going to be doing is in this column on the far left here and the column next to it. We're in projects view, and this is effectively just every task that's in my to-do list is put in this list and nested within folders. And if I open those folders, you can see these icons with dots are individual task lists. This all looks really complicated because that's basically everything that's in my to-do list. But what I really like about OmniFocus is that you're able to create different views on this far left column, kind of filtering your tasks by projects and by when they're due and things. So if I go to the PhD view, you can see here that it's got 4 main folders: admin, research, writing and engagement, and each of those has tasks and folders nested within it. And if we go over to this engagement section here, you can see Rare-Books Club. Let's add a task. I now need to give my talk. It is due now. I've done these things so I can tick them off. You can see here there's a section in the middle that's in grey is giving things tags. That's not particularly necessary if I'm just in this PhD view here, but I've got a view that I've set up on the top left called Do ASAP, which has a little pocket watch icon, and if I click on that, that is actually using those tags to filter. So if I went out of that PhD view, it would show all of the tasks that I've got to do today or in the next week, or that are a little bit overdue. But that task that I've just added is sitting there waiting to be ticked off, and I'm giving the talk now, so I will tick it off, hopefully all going well. So that is OmniFocus. You do have to pay for that, but there's lots of alternatives around. So if you are tired of whatever you're using to try and keep track of lots of different tasks that you are having to do, I really encourage you to look around and maybe give this one a try. There is a free trial, I believe. The next thing that I wanted to show to you is something called Notion. I began my PhD with making lots of Excel spreadsheets to try and keep track of this evolving corpus of manuscripts and printed books that I was looking at. And it soon just became a bit unwieldy. I'm not working with any kind of big data set, but you can see down here, I've got 840 items in this master list of everything that is on my radar. And it was just getting a little bit difficult to keep track of, basically. So this year I've started using Notion, and I find that it just offers a lot of little ways of managing this huge list that I'm finding really, really helpful. It's free to download. What I'm showing you now is the desktop app, but there's also a website and there's also apps for phones and tablets, which appeals to me a lot because I don't always just do my work at a desk or in, the reading room. I'm often thinking about it on the bus or, at different places. So I like to be able to access things a lot. What we see here is my master list. This is everything. And you'll see at the moment, it looks very much like an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of what I'm going to show you could be done in Excel. And it's got the kind of headings that you would expect. So I'm making a note of the shelf mark and the repository things are in, whether I've seen them or not. These two I will show you now. I've got a checkbox for whether or not this item is part of a book survey that I'm doing, a kind of census of numerous different titles. And then this column next to it shows you the book that I'm thinking about. Over here in the left, I have created a new view, which is taking all of this information and digesting it in a different way for me, which helps me think about it more clearly. So you can see that that's filtered out everything that's part of the book survey, and it is organising them under the headings of which book it is that I'm looking at. And then when I expand that, I'm able to see which items I'm aware of, what I found in catalogues, what I've actually gone to see, and what I've still got to see, which is super helpful. And there are ways of doing something very similar in Excel, but this just my brain can cope with a lot more easily. You'll see here also I've got a column which is created, owned, annotated by. A lot of the work that I'm doing is looking for annotations and marginalia and trying to identify hands. So this column is linked to, if we go back over here to the left, this people section here is another table, but it's linked to this primary sources table. So it is kind of like a database. And if I click on this entry here, it will take me to the profile for this guy, Richard Amadas. So this is opening up the entry from the people table, and you can see that it's listing here all of the items that he has been linked to. And down here, there's space for notes. This is one of the things I really like about Notion. It's not just the data as seen in the kind of spreadsheet. You can open each entry up and add notes. So it's really good for kind of qualitative working research. You can see here that I've popped a little picture of his handwriting in there. And if I go over to the people table, you can see that all the people that I've added handwriting for, I've made it, I've turned it into a gallery effectively, which is really helpful. I've got a rogues gallery of all these different hands that I want quick access to see if I have them in front of me in the reading room or when I'm looking at pictures after my visits. So that is a handy little thing. If we go back up to the primary sources list, you can also see that there's different views along the top here. We're currently on all items, but I've created a couple of different views here, which again are filtering this information. So I've got one that's trip planning. This is really handy for seeing which items I have not seen or I still need to see again. So it's filtering automatically by that because I've set up a rule up here. You can see I've set one requested here, so I can change that. I've added this list of possibilities, so I'll request a few more. And that's really handy for before my trip to a reading room, I will say which things I've ordered up or what I intend to order up on the day, and that makes it easy to locate these once I've got the item in front of me. And when I do have the item in front of me, I can open up the entry, You can see that's just basically all those columns, but in a different format. But if I go down here, I can add in notes. I would hopefully add in more elaborate notes than that. And I've also put a section where I can say what date I've seen it, whether I've seen it or not. So let's say, yes, I've seen that. And I created another view so that I can see what I've recently seen. And you can see that that item is now at the top. And so that's really handy for when I need to then get back to my desk and be thinking about the items that I've most recently seen, go through my notes, go through the images. So that is Notion. I'm going to whiz on now to just a couple of little things that I do, which people may already have their own systems, I'm sure you do, for actually managing the images after a trip. I am quite particular about how I like to organize things, and I make sure that I kind of send all of the images to my computer from my phone, and then I put them in folders that are related to the item with the library or archive name, followed by a shelf mark. And then I like to make sure that that information is in all the image files as well, because I just sometimes, you use images for different projects, or you store them in different places for different reasons, and it's just really good to have that information built into the file name. And if you've got a Mac, it's really easy to do that. So this one I'll show you an example of. I select the name of the file and copy that, or the name of the folder, and then you can bulk rename things. I only worked this out recently, which is why I'm sharing it. Everyone might know this already. So if you right click and then select rename, that brings up a box that's going to help us rename all of those items. And I can copy in to the text field the name of that folder with a hyphen. And I've selected that I want to add that text before the name. So I want to keep those file names to distinguish between the images. And then if I click rename, all those files are now renamed. You'll notice that these are in that weird format that iPhones take pictures in, and that's often really unhelpful. I've been in situations before where I've sent these file types to people for like a blog post, and they can't open them on their computer. I have created here a little shortcut which helps me convert those to JPEGs. And hopefully a link will be shared that gives some information about how to do that on a Mac. But if I select those files and then click that shortcut, you'll see that I have set up a little folder called Converted Images on my desktop. And hopefully, if that opens, you'll see that those images are now in there being converted. And I would, once that's finished, copy and paste those back into this folder where I'm storing the pictures and delete those original file types that aren't very helpful to me. So I'll do that now. And the final thing that I want to show you is an app called Tropy, which again, some people might be familiar with. This is open source and has been created specifically for people doing work in archives or special collections where you're taking lots and lots of images. So here you can see all of the images that I've uploaded, and they're all kind of little piles of images organized by item. So that's everything, all the pictures that I've taken of specific items, and I've named them in a very similar way to how I name the images generally. In order to put pictures into Tropy, you can just drag and drop them in like this. And they will all appear individually as images at the top. My computer is whirring away, so hopefully that will they will all appear. And what you can do when you have multiple images in there is, if I can just make sure that comes, you should be able then to highlight multiple images together, and there's an option that will come up when you right click on them that says merge items, and it will rename it based on the last file name that it read, but then you will have your little pile of images that you can see. And I will just show you an example of what that looks like in practice. So I go, hopefully this one is the one I want. You can see here that I've double clicked on that item, and now I can see all of the images that I've taken of it. And if I scroll right down, this is some church wardens' accounts from a local archive. You can see here, this image that I've selected, it has this little square icon in the bottom, and that shows you that I've used this tool here to select specific bits of the image. And then if I click on it, you can see that I've linked the transcription below just to that part of the image. I've not actually transcribed this section of it, but I can do the same thing with that and just highlight that page and add the notes below. So that's really handy, and it's really good for transcription because you can zoom in very easily and move your way around the image very easily too. And another great thing about this is that you can see on this column on the left hand side, there's lists. I've got folders, I've got tags. There's lots of different ways of exploring your images whilst you're using this software. So I think that is everything that I hope to share with you. Hopefully you found some of that useful. Yes, I will hand back over to Tabitha and Ollie.
Thanks so much, Sam. That is more than useful. I think Tropy and Notion are game changers for those of us who are using collections a lot, especially you're visiting the research, the reading room, the research, the search room. And we all have those pesky iPhone images that we can't open. So that is gold dust. Thank you very much. So we can ask questions later on. I mean, I've got questions about storage space and that sort of thing. But perhaps at this stage we'll move on to Ollie. So what Sam's done so far for us is to talk about your preparation, your time management before you go to your research appointment in the reading room, and how you manage those files and your notes and your images in the reader appointment and then afterwards. And what Ollie's going to talk about is what you might do after you've made your research visits to manage and to handle the data. Now, some of this gets a little technical, so Ollie, if you don't mind, I might interrupt you if there are any points where I think we might need a little bit more explanation. But I shall be firing things into the chat to help you. And just for those who are on the call, the chat from this session will be saved onto your Zoom folder on your desktop after the call. So as we said in the welcome slide, make sure you don't put personal information in there, but you will be able to have access to the expressions and so on that Ollie is going to give us. Now, Ollie is one of our star MA students on the Digital Humanities MA course here at UCL. And he's also working for Special Collections here on digitisation projects. And I'm going to hand over to you, Ollie, to talk about how you're going to help us to manage our data and then to express it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tabitha. So I'm going to be talking you through a workflow. I'll just share screen and show you what our end product should be. So a workflow using some catalogue data, which I've got from the English short title catalogue. And I'm going to start from cleaning that sort of initial output, which I've got. And then hopefully we should be able to get to this point here where we can query it by date, look at the sort of distribution over the decades. So I'm going to be going through a few different tools to get to this endpoint. There's obviously no definitive best way of doing it. You could definitely do it all through Excel if you wanted to. The only reason why I'm not going to use Excel is because a lot of people perhaps are already familiar with that. And I think to clean data the way which I'm going to be doing it, Excel can have quite a steep learning curve. So if you need to use all the functions to get rid of unnecessary data and whatnot, that can be sort of hard to approach. So hopefully the tools I'm using should make it a bit more approachable at the very least. So this is what we're aiming for. And then I'll quickly show you what data we'll be working with. So this is an export I got from the ESTC, and it's of 18th century titles from Newcastle. So we've got, how many rows? We've got about nearly 3,000 rows here, which we're going to be working with. So in the format, as we have it right now, the date column is varied in terms of the sort of data we've got. We've got some cells where it's already a date, so we can work with that quite easily. But then some of it, we've got bits of text in there. We've got Roman numerals, we've got square brackets, bits of punctuation. So if we wanted to try and analyze that quickly, those sort of things would get in the way. So the way which if you had just one column, for example, which you want to strip, the way which I would quickly do that would be by using regular expressions. So regular expressions are a pattern matching tool, which are used across loads of different platforms, programming languages, applications. It's very widespread. So it's really useful if you know how to do it, because you're going to find so many different situations where you can use them. And the idea behind it is that it enables you to edit and select very specific bits of text from a larger selection. So the easiest way to use it, like I say, you can use it in programming languages, but the easiest way is just do a web application. There are a few different ones, but for today, I'll be showing you RegXr. And this, very easy to use. You can type your expression up here in this top bar. You put the text which you want it to interrogate here in that middle section, and then we can see outputs in this bottom bit here. So I put some sample text here just sort of explain how you create selections by writing regular expressions. So what you put in the expression, it will read very literally. So if you put, let's say, G, it's going to be matching those two G's there from these three lines. If you put grey, spelled like that, then you're going to be getting all of that text there. But you can also, as well as putting precise text, you can also give it slightly more fuzzy options. So let's say you wanted to get both spellings of grey. You can use square brackets, and that's going to be telling it wants one specific character, and then we can put A and E in there. And as you can see there, it's selecting both versions of grey. And you can also use it to select different types of characters. So if you use \W, that's going to be giving you anything, right? But let's say we want to get numbers, which is what we need to do for this specific task. You can use \D, and then that's selecting each of these individually. You can also specify how many times you want that specific character to be used. So because we're going for years, we need four years. So we can use squiggly brackets here. And this is going to be saying how many times you want it to occur. So if we had 1 in there, it's going to be the same as we had before, but we can also put 4, and that's going to have that as a whole chunk by itself. The other way we can write numbers is by using square brackets like we did with A and E earlier. And you can use ranges. So you could use A to Z, let's say, and that's going to be every letter between A and Z. But you could also use numbers, 0 to 9. And one thing which I really like about RegXr is you can hover over it, and it's really good at explaining exactly what your expression is going to be doing. So bearing that in mind, if we go back to our data, we can just copy and paste this whole column across into the text box here. And we can write an expression which will try and extract just the number, so like 1793 from here, not including that square bracket, and then give it as a list, which we can then copy and paste and put back into Excel. So to do that, we're going to use the square brackets like before, 0 to 9, because it's going to be digits, and we want 4 of them. Okay, so if you remember earlier from the data set, which I showed, we had, where does it say, here we are, 2,764 lines. But if you look, we've got slightly more matches. And the reason behind that is because we've got certain cells where we have a date range. So obviously, if we copied and pasted that data out, it wouldn't match up properly, and it wouldn't work. So we need to only get one date per line. And for the sake of this, I'm only going to be taking the first date in the date range. So the way we do that, we need to be a bit more specific about what we want. So we're going to use capture groups, and capture groups are just a way of telling it like which bit we want, more or less. Because beforehand, it was just one expression by itself. So we'll set up 2 capture groups. The first one is going to be the the unnecessary text beforehand. So it would be that bit of the square bracket. And the second one is what we actually want to get out of it. So to get the stuff beforehand, we're going to use the square brackets again, because we want to select text which isn't a number. So to do that, you can use the hat symbol, which is up here, and we can do 0 to 9 again. And now this is saying select anything which isn't a number, but we also need to specify how many times that happens, because currently we're just saying once. So we can use the star afterwards, and that's going to modify it, and it's only going to be giving us the bits beforehand. But we also now need to say whereabouts in the string we want it to happen. So if we use the hat symbol outside of the square bracket, then that's going to tell it to do it from the start. So now we've got 2 catch groups, and as you can see here, it's showing you, it's getting all the way up to the end of the first number. So there are lots of different things you can use to query data and be specific about what bits of text you want. So if it's going over your head, there is a cheat sheet which you can find quite handily somewhere over here. Here we are. And that sort of explains how everything works. But having a dynamic workspace where you do it through a website like this, it's quite easy to sort of play around and sort of see when it starts to work. They can be very frustrating working with regular expressions. So yeah, there's a lot of tweaking. So now we've got 2 catch groups. We can now get a list using RegXr through the tools function, and we go on the list tab. So this currently means it's going to give us every match we've got, but because we've set up 2 capture groups, we just want that second capture group. So if we put 2 instead of an and, we're going to get a list here. And we could just copy and paste this across if we wanted to. And whilst that's quite a quick and easy way of doing it, if you've got a particularly messy data set you're working with, you might have lots of different transformations you need to be doing. So for those sort of cases where you've got quite a lot of work to be doing in terms of cleaning or reformatting, I would recommend, and it's the tool which I've been using recently, OpenRefine, which is just here. So OpenRefine is effectively a tool for cleaning and reformatting lots of different data types. So you can see up here on the top, it covers loads of different file formats, CSV, Excel files, JSON, XML, and even MARC files as well, actually. And it just, whereas you can do all of these reformatting and cleaning things in Excel, it's more dedicated. So rather than having to work with all the intricacies of lots of complicated formula, the sort of things you're writing for expressions tend to be a bit shorter. And I find it personally a bit easier to get the hang of. So we'll start off by uploading our data set. And then it's going to work out that it's a CSV file, so you don't need to do that. But if not, you can sort of specify exactly what you need to do. And then we can create project. And once it's loaded, we can see it's given us the first 10 rows of that CSV file we had over here. And it shows you all the columns, and you can, through these column headings, you can get this little drop-down menu. You can start to edit it by column or by cell. And there are lots of different options here, but we're only going to be using a few. I'll try not to go into it too much, but let's start with doing the transformation we had before with the date, but this time through OpenRefine. So from the drop-down menu here on the date column, we can go to edit column, and then I'm going to add another column. So we could edit this column and just change everything, but I quite like keeping the original column which we're working with in case we need to come back to it for some reason, because you can always hide columns. I feel like it's better to have every step of the transformation process there, so you can sort of see if there are any errors happening. So we're going to add a column based on this, and we can call this cleaned date. And we're going to be using regular expressions like we had before, but using what they call GREL. This used to be called Google Refine. So I think this is a bit of a remnant of when it should have been called Google Refine Expression Language rather than General Refine Expression Language. But we're going to be using that to implement that regular expression which we wrote earlier. So currently it's just a copy and paste. If we just have value, that's copying each cell across, but we're going to use the match function. which is the regular expression thing. So in the circular brackets, we're going to put 2 forward slashes, and that's telling it we're going to be reading a regular expression. And there's one thing to note about using regular expressions through this platform is that it operates slightly differently to if we just had it like this. Whereas in this platform, if you make an expression, it's just going to pick it out from a bit of text. If you do it through here, it needs to be an exact match. So you can't just have numbers. We can't do 0 to 9 like that, because it's going to get a bit confused because it doesn't fit the pattern for everything. So we need to then also have cases where it's going to account for bits of text beforehand and bits of text after. So we can do that again by setting up capture groups. So this is the bit we know we're definitely going to want using those circular brackets. And then the bit beforehand, like we had before, we're going to have square brackets, and we're having any bit of text which isn't a number. So we need the hat symbol at the start of that square bracket, and it's going to be happening any number of times. And we also, so you see it's correctly capturing what we want for these ones, but in the cases where there's text afterwards, it's getting a bit confused. So we also now need to say, and there's going to be some stuff afterwards. And as you can see, it's currently giving us that in slightly odd format. It's in square brackets and exclamation marks, and that's because it's exporting it as a list. So this is just a little thing you need to do. You need to add square brackets to the end of this expression outside of the regular expression bit, and then you say give a selection of 0. So that's the first thing in the list. And then if we click OK, well, we can quickly scroll down the preview and see that it's working. This is a really helpful tool. So you sort of know what's going on. So click OK. And there we have it. We've got our clean date format. And then I'm going to do one other quick transformation to this, just to get it in the decade format, which we need. And this, we're going to do the same thing, drop down from the clean date. We're going to do add column based on this column. We can call this decade. So taking the original value here, we're going to modify it with another function, but this time we're going to use slice. So to get the decade, all we need are the first 3 digits of the year. So if we do 0 to 3, that's just going to give us the first 3 digits. And then we can add a bit of extra text to it. We'll just put 0 and S just to indicate that it's a decade. And we can go through the preview again, and we can see that it's correctly given us everything we wanted. And there we are. And then one other quick bit of reformatting, which isn't going to be relevant for the visualization at the end, but it might be helpful, would be reformatting this author column here. So this is just giving it with all of the different dollar fields here, but we just want the names, let's say. So again, we can use regular expressions. We're going down from the drop down to edit column, add column based on this column. And we're going to call this cleaned authors or author name. We're going to use regular expressions again. Dot match is the function which we're using to modify that value. And we're going to use forward slashes to contain it. And based on the way that these have been formatted, we know the name's always going to be in between $A, which is going to be coming at the start, $A space to be precise. So we can write $A space. And then we're going to get the capture group because that's what we want. And then all the extra stuff at the end. Now, actually, we can't use dot. Dot means anything, by the way, in case I hadn't made that clear. Dot means literally any character. So we know that when we get to another pipe symbol, that means that we're at the end of the name. So actually, for our capture group, which we want, we could just say anything which isn't a pipe. Now, you might notice that that's not working, and there's a reason why. Certain symbols, like the star or dot, mean things in regular expressions. They tell it to modify a character, and pipe is the same thing. So in order to get that to work, we need to use an escape character, which is the backward slash. So if you put that there we see it's working now. We'll put it there just to be safe. And that means that read it as a pipe symbol. Don't use it to modify text either side of it. And again, we need to put square brackets and specify which bit we want. Click OK, and we've got our cleaned author name. And if we want to do one further transformation to it, we can split it into first name and second name, and we can do that quite easily. don't need to write any regular expressions or anything like that. We can just do the drop down, edit columns, split into several columns, and it's automatically going to be giving it using the correct separator, but which is a comma. But if we wanted to use another one, we could put anything. It could be a hyphen or some such, but we're using comma in this case. And that's going to quickly split it into 3 different columns. And you'll notice it's given us a blank one because there's a space at the end of it, but we can get rid of that quite easily. We can just do edit column, remove this column. And then we've got 2 columns here, which we can then rename if you want to. So this will be the author forename. So we can do edit column, rename this column, author forename. Then we can rename this one, author. Okay, so now we've got all the decades data we need for this visualization, and we've also tidied up some extra bits just for fun. So we can export it by going to the top right corner, export, and we'll export it as an Excel file. And then this will download it to your web browser, and you can just pop that onto the background like so. So now we can even go into this just to check that it all looks fine. Now we have the data in a format which we can actually work with if we want to create some analytics around it. So we could do this in Excel, which I'll do very quickly because it's super easy. You could just go into insert, recommended charts, usually helps, there we are. And this is a similar output to the one we had before. And that's a really quick way of doing it. But if you wanted a bit more fine control or to tweak things and maybe change the data set slightly differently, I've been using R recently through RStudio. And here is the platform, RStudio. So R is a programming language designed for statistical analysis. And RStudio is the environment which you can quite easily run it in. I'm not going to explain every single step I'm doing here because it's a little bit more complicated. But there'll be links in the chat with tutorials and whatnot. So if you are interested and think it could be helpful, do have a look. So to start off with, to make that visualization I showed at the end, we need to import a few packages into R. So this is going to help us read the Excel file. And then this package here, Tidyverse, is then going to help us plot that using some plotting packages. So to read the file, and this is a helpful tip for anyone who's on this most recent version of Windows. If you need to copy the file path, you can just right-click the file. If it loads. Let's try again. Right-click the file and drop down to copy as path. And that's a real time saver rather than having to work out exactly which directory it's in and then writing it out. Yeah, that saved me a lot of time. So now we've got the file path we need, we can import that data set into R. So we're going to use the RegXr function, which we've imported, and then we're just going to copy and paste that path, which we've got. I have that on my clipboard. One thing you do need to do though is you need to change the direction of the slashes because RegXr doesn't like it in that direction for some reason. Okay, so that should work now. Unless it hasn't worked. Technical difficulties. Let's try it. Let's try again. Let's copy and paste the file. If this doesn't work, which it might not, then I will have to hand back over to Tabitha, but let's just try it again. Let's try again. Okay. So changing the direction of the slashes again. Oh, I know why that hasn't worked. It's because the file's open. There we are. Back on track. That's one thing to note when you're editing files, if they're open, that's a common way of why scripts don't run properly. There we are. And there we are, it's loaded now. So we can double check that by just typing the variable name in. And it has worked. although it hasn't given us everything, but that's fine. That's all we need. So using this data, then we can use ggplot, which is in the Tidyverse package, and we can specify the data set we're going to be working with. Actually, no, this is imported the wrong package. I'll tell you what, I'm going to hand back to Tabitha because slight technical issues, but hopefully I will also include the links to how I actually did the visualization. I'll put the commands in case you want to follow along at home or something like that. But I hope that there's something there which you might be able to apply to your own workflows.
Do you want to just show us that visualization that you
Yes, good idea. There we are.
Super. And am I right, Ollie, that this is part of your dissertation, that you're looking at 18th century Newcastle imprints?
Yeah, that's right. I'm doing a network analysis of printers and booksellers in sort of provincial metropolitan areas in the UK. So that's an example of one of the data sets which I've been working with.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really looking forward to that research when you finish. Thank you so much, Ollie, and thank you so much, Sam. So we've got a few minutes left now. If we get Ollie and Sam back up, we'll enable you to unmute yourselves and start your videos if you wish, and to send everyone a chat message. And you're very welcome to add questions in the chat or to click the raised hand button, and we can make sure that you get unmuted to ask your question. In the meantime, I just wanted, before everybody goes, to say a big thank you to both Sam and Ollie. This is the sort of thing that it's quite hard to learn once you've moved on from being a student, and I think a lot of these things will really change the way we work. I'm adding a little feedback form link in the chat in case you'd like to say anything about this session or the whole series. And we'd like to thank the Bentham's Body Ensemble for the recording of music that they made specially for this series at the beginning, and Joe Baines, who's our academic liaison librarian for UCL East, who's managing the Zoom behind the scenes. So now let's see if we have any questions. We've got a question from Sandy, who says, are all these maps open source, or do any have advertising or privacy issues? Very good question, Sandy. I don't know if either of you wants to go ahead and answer that.
Not all of the ones that I showed are open source. Tropy definitely is. The others, you have options where you can pay for them. They are like proprietary software. And I suppose I've just made decisions, especially the time tracking and the task management, there's no real issues there. Notion does say that it's GDPR compliant, and obviously you would use Notion in a very specific set of circumstances where I find it really useful because it is this kind of working corpus. If I wanted to do things with that data that Ollie has just demonstrated, I would definitely be exporting that into spreadsheets and cleaning those up and stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things where you need to look into the software that you're choosing to use, obviously.
Yeah, everything I've mentioned is open source and free. We should be putting links in the chat for downloads and whatnot if you want to try them out yourself.
Yeah, so we've added links to the chat, and that'll save onto your machines to access this software and the cheat sheets that Ollie put down, and the little key to converting your iPhone images that Sam gave us. We've got a question from Katie. In RegXr, so this is for you, Ollie, what would happen if there is no date value in a row? Would it copy and paste the empty space back into Excel? That's a good question, because sometimes you will have something that has a blank value.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you were using it through RegXr, it wouldn't give you a blank space. That's one of the advantages of doing it in OpenRefine. It would give you the blank space. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I hope that answers your question, Katie. A question from Nicholas. This is for Sam or for both of you. Please recommend a good and free image viewer or image editor for Mac. Sam,
Tropy can be brilliant for that. Like, I'm organising things by items, but you could structure your images in a different way there. And it allows you to do things. I think you can crop images in there and rotate them and things. But otherwise, I just tend to use the native preview app that when you double click on an image, it will automatically open things in. Not only can you crop and rotate things in there, but you can also adjust the colour levels and contrast and stuff, which sometimes is really handy for pictures of like manuscripts if you're trying to make writing show up more and things. Yeah, that's the only ones I tend to use. I do have Photoshop and stuff, which obviously isn't free, for more heavy editing, but I suppose it really depends what exactly you're after. But I think the native software is actually really good.
Yeah, thanks very much. It certainly really helps to do a bit of editing if you're trying to see annotations and manuscript. Ollie, I don't know if you've got any recommendations for image editing software.
No, I don't use Mac, I'm afraid. So I don't really have anything to add to that. I'll trust Sam's recommendations on that then.
Great, thanks very much. We've got a question from Scott, but before that, I'd just like to say if anybody needs to head off to work, we've got 3 minutes till 2 o'clock. So do leave us, and the rest of you will be staying until up to 2:30 if you want to ask a question. I know we've got one person with their hand up, but just to go to Scott's question first. A question for Sam. You seem to store photos and make notes in both Tropy and in Notion. Could you explain a bit more what work you do in each? Is Notion for managing the information and Tropy for working in more detail with transcripts, or how does it work?
This is a really good question, and one that I'm actually still kind of grappling with, because I love the fact that Notion, because it's accessible on all my different devices, I can access it wherever I am. And sometimes, you know, if I'm on the bus and I'm thinking about someone's handwriting or trying to transcribe something, just sitting on a bus journey can sometimes crack it. Whereas Tropy, I have to be at my laptop to use because it's only the computer software. And I think I am starting to settle on a system where Tropy is all the images go in there. When I need to really zoom in and do transcription and do the kind of thinking about the material properties of these things, that's where I'm going to be doing that work. And I think the way I'm going to use Notion is that I might just upload a couple of key images of things so that whilst I'm working in Notion, I can be comparing things as I go, or as I'm thinking about things, I can just open up an image to refresh my memory about what the binding was on something or what the annotations looked like. But Notion isn't set up to be an image viewer. So whilst the images will sit there and it's great for making those kind of gallery views like I did with the handwriting and quickly looking at things, you can't easily zoom in and you can't edit images once they're in there. So the proper image work, it will definitely be happening in Tropy. But brilliant question, thank you.
Great. So do you think you could do everything you need in Tropy?
I don't, as much as the note space is brilliant for the transcriptions, and it has the tags and the folders, it's not set up to be in any way like a kind of spreadsheet or a database. So Notion just gives you that flexibility to find connections through things in a way that, you know, it's not an access database. It's never going to be able to do that job. But for a working corpus and for trying to find links for things as you're adding things to your corpus and still trying to come up with, you know, what is the research that I'm doing, Notion is the best thing I've found for doing that.
Yeah, it seems really great. We've got a question from Erica. Erica, I don't know if you want to unmute or switch your video on.
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you, Ollie and Sam, for both of your talks. I think they were really interesting, and you both covered some tools I certainly didn't know about, and I'm looking forward to trying out. I've got a question for Ollie. Just looking at your initial data set, I was wondering, because it seems that the data column that you had in that initial set was from the 260 field in MARC, which is the publication information. And I was wondering why you decided to use that field rather than the 008 field, which has, because the 260 is for the publication information, it's a free text field. It's basically a transcription of what's in the imprint. But in MARC 008, there should be a codified version of the date in there. So I was just wondering what your what the benefit was of using 260 instead.
So that relates more to how I'm using that data set for the network analysis side of things. So I just use the data set. I just basically copied and pasted it in for this, repurposed it for this talk. But the reason I used it, had the 260 was because I needed that imprint information to do with the location and where it was sold. So that's why it would have been probably easier if for date purposes if we were just querying the data and making a histogram like that, then that probably would have been quicker. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense. I was wondering if there was another reason, but that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
I guess theoretically, you also might have discrepancy between what's printed on the title page and what you put in the double rate. For those of you who, I know we've got an audience that's a mixture of researchers, archivists and librarians. When we're saying things like $A, $D and 008, we're talking about MARC coding, which precedes each field of information in a library catalogue record. And I just want to say that Ollie's done amazing work, because actually your degree is not library science, it's in digital humanities. And although you did take the historical bibliography course, you didn't actually do the book cataloguing course. So the fact that you're doing all this work in MARC is extremely impressive. And we've got some comments. Great. So Scott, who asked one of the questions earlier, says that they've looked at Tropy and Notion and their current pile of Excel sheets and Word documents, and it's really useful to see how the tests and activities have worked out. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, Scott.
I'm really pleased to hear that as well, because I have spent so much time like trying to find ways to make things work and find the tools that are helpful to me. So if it's any help to anyone, even if you're watching this being like, well, that's not for me, that's definitely not what I need, that's brilliant.
Super. So I had a question about the amount of file storage space that these things take up. Do you have, particularly if you've got images, if the things are not web-based, do you have any problems there?
So Tropy, one little thing about it that I should have mentioned actually is that it likes to have a kind of static folder of pictures that it always will look at. It can't rely on the cloud. So that's why you always need to use it with a computer. And I tend, because I've got so many images now and I can't keep them all on my laptop at once because it just fills up and doesn't work anymore. I have a little USB stick which all the images live on. That's the only thing that lives on there. And Tropy is linked to that folder. So it is good to think about the amount of data that you're going to be using, because it takes a little bit of time for Tropy to kind of re-see the images if it loses that connection. So another thing I would suggest is, if you do start using it, I have a piece of software that I use to kind of clean old files and stuff from my computer, and just a kind of regular maintenance thing that I run. And it sometimes wants to clean the user cache of different software that I use. And I never let it clean the cache of Tropy, because that means that it stops seeing those links. So it's good to just be aware of things like that as well. If you come across trouble with it, there probably is a little fix like that will speed it up.
That's very sage advice. Just out of interest, what software do you use to clean your Mac?
It's called Clean My Mac. It's very good.
Yeah. Ollie, what about you? What tips do you have for storing data, especially when you're working with large reports? Because you've been getting reports from ECCO and from ESTC, so they're going to be quite large files.
Yeah, well, it's mostly text, so it's not as big as image files would be. But when they're separated into so many different spreadsheets and CSVs, then it becomes a case of having a really good, solid file directory system, which is something which I'm still grappling with now. And I have a lot of very messy folders, which I wouldn't want to show anyone. It's definitely a skill.
Great. And I know your dab hand at filtering your Excel in the digitization work that you're doing with us.
But it does mean you can sometimes lose rows though when you have so many filters on. So it's a lot of keeping track.
And a bit hazardous. But that nifty way of saving the file path is really, really helpful. Fantastic. So I don't know if there's any more questions out there. Otherwise, we'll draw this to a close. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us from across the world, I think it's fair to say. And we look forward to seeing you at more sessions. We're going to have some online sessions and some in-person sessions so that we get we can offer you a bit of both. So look out on Eventbrite on our Rare-Books Club Eventbrite page. We'll be adding the booking sessions there, and also keep an eye on our Twitter, which is at UCL SpecCol. And we hope you have a good day or evening or night or morning, and we hope to see you in future events. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.